Foundation Private Limited. And VASSU Talent Search is a vertical of IIFPL in which we work towards enhancing different skill sets of students, be it academic or non-academic. We are in the process of launching of VASSU, and today we have with us an esteemed panel of speakers who would be talking about inculcating entrepreneurial mindset in classrooms and beyond. This, I feel, is a very, very relevant topic of the day, because in this fast changing world where we where the needs and demands in terms of skill sets are constantly changing dynamics, students need to develop a mindset that would enable them to think out of the box, take risks, be focused, stay resilient, flexible, plan ahead, collaborate, and think creatively, and much, much more. The key of meeting these complex challenges is to equip students with an entrepreneurial mindset, and right at the onset of their academic journey, encouraging them to take ownership of their learning while developing the attitudes, behavior, and skill that will enable them to succeed in college, in work, and in life. And today, we are glad to have Dr. Sriparna B Baruah with us. Dr. Sriparna is a development professional with 33 years of work experience in management, education, and in small and medium enterprise development. She is currently associated with the Indian Institute of Entrepreneurship as head, Center of the Industrial Extension. During her career span for more than 30 years, apart from playing a pioneer role in promoting management education in Northeast India, during her initial 10 years of working with the Assam Institute of Management, her involvement in the last 2 decades has been on entrepreneurship and livelihood promotion. Dr. Baruah has extensive experience in action research and projects relating to development of livelihood clusters, specifically in all the 8 states of northeastern region of India. She took up a cluster development on a mission mode and the impact created through various need-based interventions resulted in development of sustainable development models for the region. She is also the recipient of the Bharat Vikas Award. A big welcome to you, Dr. Sriparna. We are so glad you're here.
Thank you so much, Vasavi. Thank you. Happy to be here.
We have with us Mr. Ben Campos, who has 35 years of experience in sales, leadership, and professional development, and has been coaching across a cross-section of industries. He was heading the sales, learning, and development team of IBM India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. He represented the IBM growth markets, BRICS countries. Additionally, he is a part of the leadership development, learning, and development team for ASEAN. He is an NLP certified coach and practitioner from NLP University under Robert Dills at UCLA University. A big welcome to Mr. Ben, who has also been my mentor in the Here and Now program. So a big welcome to you, sir. We have Drishti Medhi. She is the co-founder of Quick Guwahati. Quick Guwahati is a sustainable service chain startup from Guwahati that has actively been working on connecting blue-collared workforce to the market and helping them extensively for their overall welfare. Drishti is a graduate in electrical engineering from Assam Engineering College and is also active in community building. She is currently a global shaper at the Guwahati Shapers Hub, part of the global shaper community under World Economic Forum. So this completes our panel, which is, assimilation of lot of different kind of experiences and work zones. And we have, I think this is going to be a very, very interesting discussion. So my first question is, it's the first round, and this question is for all our panelists. What is an entrepreneurial mindset according to you, and do you think it is an important life skill? If so, why? And my question is to Dr. Sriparna Baruah. Over to you.
Thank you, Vasavi. At the outset, let me, congratulate you for thinking about such an important area for taking up as a discussion. I think in today's context, having an entrepreneurial mindset and talking about being enterprising is one of the most important thing, and we can't ignore that. Having said that, what is an entrepreneurial mindset? To speak about it very, very simply, I would say it's all about a certain way of thinking. It's the way we approach challenges, mistakes, and opportunities. When you look at life, we have challenges, we make mistakes, and we have opportunities also. So it's all about how do we take up challenges. Every challenge also provides an opportunity. Are we looking at the challenge as an opportunity? Are we making, when we make mistakes, how do we react and how do we come back on the mistakes, learn from the mistakes? And as far as opportunities are concerned, the moment an opportunity comes in, do we miss it, or we keep on waiting, or we procrastinate? So it's all about the way of a certain way of thinking. And to just get on further on that, it's also, it is the can-do spirit in a person that I can do it. That is how I look at what is an entrepreneurial mindset, because it's ultimately the spirit that, propels someone to move forward. And how one looks at challenges is extremely important, because the entrepreneurial mindset helps one to cope, to survive, and to excel in life. So it is this mindset, finally, what I would like to say is something which helps a person to develop the need for achievement. And as they say, need for achievement is something, which if you have, a person has the need for achievement, anything you will find or overcome any sort of trouble, any problem that you have in life. And that's what you require in life. And this, once you have this mindset, you start developing certain skills unknowingly. The skills could be something like creativity skills, because you look at problems and opportunities. So you ultimately you start thinking innovatively, you become a creative person, you are a problem solver, you have empathy towards others, and then ability to identify opportunities. So overall, my first point on what is an entrepreneurial mindset, this is in simple words what I would like to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Very beautifully said, and in concise. You, I think, got everything in a capsule, what we need and what finally, it makes up an entrepreneurial mindset. Now, I would want to hear from Mr. Ben, what is his take on what is an entrepreneurial mindset? Over to you. You're muted, sir.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so just taking along whatever Sriparna has just mentioned, it's totally aligned with my thoughts. So does my, the dimension I would like to address is not just about, is entrepreneurial mindset, does it mean that you have to be an entrepreneur? Yes. It generally would have the competencies for you to become an entrepreneur, but then that's the mindset that's required in any work environment. Because in every work environment itself, people, the managing director, the bosses, they always expect you to take ownership and to drive the business, and therefore for you to look for opportunities itself. So if you can do it for somebody else, then from there it comes on to yourself that I can do it for myself. So why don't I start? So the constraints are primarily of other external factors like finance and other elements, and maybe the ability to risk take, thinking about if I leave the income that comes constantly. Those are factors that stop us from taking a step towards thinking us on ourselves. And again, building a brand. There's so many other dimensions to it. But just as what Sriparna said, the entrepreneurial mindset is a set of skills that enable people to identify and make the most of opportunities, overcome and learn from their setbacks, and succeed in a variety of settings, which could be either in a career perspective or in your own business by itself. So when you're looking at, so another very element, the basic definition of entrepreneurial mindset, if you have to ask me to think about it, so how you think. Okay, when you say mindset means thinking, how you think. And when you start talking about thinking, it primarily tells you the way you think if you go by the definition of an attitude, it's about the way you think. So it's all, it depends on your attitude that drives you, and how you look at opportunities and how you go and look for solutions, and how you succeed all over. Okay, so it's a mindset not only for you to start in business, but it's also a mindset for you to grow in an organization and therefore scale up the organization. And that's what today organizations are looking at, for employees who can think like an entrepreneur. Okay, so that's my take on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ben. Very well said. It's a growth mindset. How, and in whatever settings, be it whether you're an entrepreneur or you may not be an entrepreneur, but even if you're working in an organization, how can you take it forward in a way where you can meet up, have different skill sets to deal with problems in the day-to-day life, or to look, beyond and have a vision. Now we have the same question goes to Drishti, who is a young entrepreneur. And she has started her own venture with her brother. And so what do you think is an entrepreneur mindset? What did you have in mind when you started your venture?
Right. Thank you for the question. I think the esteemed panelists, Mr. Ben and Sriparna ma'am, has already added a very, value worthy perspective about what an entrepreneurial mindset is. And my take on this would be completely specific to what I believe as a full-time entrepreneur, and how it impacts the way I think, and the way it influences the people that I work along with, right? So usually what happens is, it's not always a big idea that paves the path to ultimate success. Oftentimes the success and failure, it comes down to a few characteristics of the entrepreneur. And if you come to think of it, there are, I would like to specify 5 such points that is related to the success or a failure of any entrepreneurs. First of all, having a positive attitude, because the mindset of that entrepreneur sets the tone of the entire company, and it also influences the company culture. And and if you have the positive mindset, that does not necessarily mean that you can just ignore everything that's going around you, or if there's any sort of setback or anything negative happens, but it also specifically means to how you are mentally reframing your responses, how you develop the positive attitude. Second thing would be having a creative mindset. And like they always say, creativity is the mother of all invention. And the basic cycle of any entrepreneurial product usually stems from the concept of an idea, which is followed by turning into some viable product or service. Now, Steve Jobs had said that, creativity is just about connecting things. And if you ask creative people how did they do it, they usually feel very guilty, because they don't really know how exactly they did it. But more often than not, it's just because they were able to connect the dots. And that is how sometimes most successes happen. And that is why creativity is so important. Fourth point would be having a persuasive communication skills. Now, why persuasion is so important? Because as an entrepreneur, not to mention, being a persuasive person helps you close a lot of deals. It helps you convince people why they should be either buying from you, or why your product or service are so relevant in the market. And it also influences the way people would be looking up to you and would be willing to work together with you. And this is definitely a skill that can be inculcated over time. There are several courses, there are mentors or coaches who help you build on these persuasive communication skills. That was the third point. Fourth point would be also having an intrinsic motivation and drive. Sure, there are certain external factors that can definitely influence the way you react to things, but until and unless the concerned entrepreneur does not have that intrinsic drive in themselves, it does become a little difficult from the day-to-day life as to how they are reacting or how they are influencing the people who are in their immediate circle as well. And having that intrinsic motivation and an intrinsic drive is extremely important. Last but not the least is, you know, having tenacity and an ability to learn from failure. I think every entrepreneur just become very comfortable with the fact that failure at any point is inevitable. It may happen today or tomorrow or at any point in time, but having that change in perspective of how are you looking towards your failure, like are you looking at it as an opportunity to improve yourself or improve your product or service, or are you just letting that particular setback take you back from the journey that you have come so far. So being very comfortable with the idea of failure and just looking at it as an opportunity for growth. So I think these would be my 5 points to how an entrepreneurial mindset looks like.
Thank you, Drishti. Very interesting and very pertinent points taken. And here I would say this motivation and drive, which is one of the key reasons which turned me into an entrepreneur. Though, you know, it was expected that I should take up a government job or something, or, you know, that is basically the culture in the northeast of India, where it's more academic based, it's more work based, it's more service based. So I think this motivation and drive made me stand again, stand to all the things that came up to me, that this is risk and this is that, but I think that kept me going. And yes, the failed ventures, in fact, you know, were very, very big lessons that I learned when I studied the failed ventures, where not to go wrong. So now, very beautifully explained, and thank you. We have come to the end of the round one. So now we'll come to individual questions for each panelist. My first question is to Mr. Ben. How do you think students can be motivated to develop entrepreneurial thinking? And what are the entrepreneurial mindset characteristics that you would want to point out? Over to you, Mr. Ben.
Thank you, Vasavi. So can I have this slide?
Yeah, I think it's
share?
Yeah, I think the share screen is enabled. Just try that. Are you able to share, or should I be sharing?
Yeah, I can share. So all of you can see this?
Yes.
So let me just. Okay, so before I come to the motivational aspects, okay, there are, of course, the various factors that motivate, and the best way to find out what motivates a person, as Drishti had mentioned, what is the objective, what is the purpose for which you have started the business? It need not always be passion. It could be just circumstances that they couldn't get a job at the right time. It could be that they have a lot of fun, so I start a business. So it could be a thought process that happens. So generally, when a person is starting out his business, by the purpose in which they're setting out, either to make money or to try and bring a new concept. When you look at Ola, when you look at Ola, Oyo, when you look at Tesla, ID, look at these people, they're all individual entrepreneurs, and the purpose for which each one is driven, if you look at the backgrounds, are quite different, and from which background they came from. So generally, if you look at the goal, what motivates each person could be quite different. But how they bring it all together, that is what is the thought process, the conceptualization. So looking for opportunities, as was mentioned. And when you're talking about motivation, there are, as Drishti had mentioned, about 5 of those competencies. So I would talk about, generally, when you're talking about an entrepreneurial mindset, we're talking about these 8 competencies. You could have more, but these 8 competencies that is required. And what is a competency? That's the first question that might arise in your mind. What do you mean by competency? Competency could be a skill set, it could be a knowledge base, or it could be attitude. So you require all these three factors which need to come together to make that entrepreneurial thinking happen. So when you look at these 8 competencies, there's a description of each one given there. The first is, of course, critical thinking, the capacity to apply higher level process-oriented thinking. Consider an issue from a range of possible perspectives. So how do you look at what are the various opportunities in front of you? How do you think about it? How do you deduce the positives, whether it's feasible, not feasible? So how do you think through the idea? And of course, one of the important elements is all about flexibility and adaptability. You have to be extremely flexible because the thought process with which you went into the venture or the entrepreneurial thinking may not be what actually translates on the ground. So therefore, you need to be open-minded to learn, to adapt, to adopt, and be, for example, now this COVID times, what is a model that you had thought about? Suddenly there has been a total change. So are you, like Drishti talked about tenacity, you need to have the tenacity to start thinking differently and see how do I look at this opportunity? What can I do with it? So therefore, you need to be extremely flexible and willingness to change and adapt. And as also Sriparna had mentioned, and so did Drishti mention about communication and collaboration, the ability to clearly express ideas and intended audience, including persuading others to work towards a common goal. So one of the key elements which I learned also, I've got a small venture where it was all about, the key element is building trust, building relationships. And building relationships and trust, they are my intent. But how do I go about them? It's all about communication. And in a business, in an entrepreneurial mindset, to get ideas, it's always, it's not only me, I, it's all about collaborating. How do I look at us? And therefore bringing it all together. That's very, very, very critical as a team, as an individual, bringing it all together. And another element of the entrepreneurial mindset is comfort with risk. The capacity to move forward with a decision despite inevitable uncertainty and challenges, perspectives, and use the reasonings to make these decisions. Therefore, the risk-taking ability, moving out of your comfort zone. The question is, what is it? Most of the time, people have got lovely ideas. It's just moving out of the comfort zone and to take the risk and to plunge head on into it. That is what stops them from taking on the venture on their own. The fifth competency is initiative and self-reliance, the power to take ownership. It's not just accountability. Ownership is, it's mine, I'm responsible, and how do I, so the solution doesn't fit, so how do I look at alternatives to make this happen, to make this work? So the initiative and the self-reliance about yourself, having confidence about yourself, that's the fifth that we could think about. And another element in entrepreneurial mindset competency is all about future orientation, optimistic disposition with a focus on obtaining the skills and knowledge required to transition into a career. How do I make this into a futuristic, helping in terms of developing, in terms of scalability, in terms of taking it to the next level? So unless you have that kind of a mindset, one does not grow. Otherwise, you might start a venture, but after some time you get bored. So you need to have, like when you look at Byju's, when you look at Just Dial, when you look at these people, how they have scaled their whole concept, their product to a different level, and now they're going international. So these are the mindsets that get translated by the future orientation. And as we had started with the whole idea of opportunity and recognition, the practice of seeing and experiencing problems as an opportunity or as a problem, it all depends on the individual. And last but not the least, creative and innovation, the ability to think of ideas, create solutions to problems without clearly defined structures. That means you need not always have a formal structure, but the idea is to think outside the box and think about and putting yourself into doing more than looking at thinking too much about it. Sometimes things don't get done. And when you're talking about environment, when you're talking about attitude, which I had mentioned about, because the way you think is all about, if you go by the definition of attitude, it is all about the way you think. And when you're talking about thinking, entrepreneurial thinking, there are three factors that create a student's or a person's attitude, the environment, the experience, and the education. So when you're talking about the environment, so if you look in generally business families, the whole concept, the environment is all about business. A conversation over dinner table is business. Their whole conversation across the house, the people they interacted is all about business. So generally a person who's in a family of doctors, the whole interaction is all about medicine and all that thing. So the child generally inculcates into creating a profession of medicine, a politician. So therefore, if you really look at it, most of the times people follow the profession of their parents. Why? It's primarily because the environment in which they live in, and when they see, and most of them see their fathers or their mothers or somebody very close in the family as their ideals, and that motivates them. And therefore, that environment creates a way of thinking. So you need to be an environment where the conversation is about business, is about entrepreneurial mindset, about looking at new opportunities, about how do you think about opportunities, how do you implement opportunities, how do you think outside the box. So that opportunity drive creates your mind to think. The more you travel, the more you think. Putting it into practice, experiencing it, it's just not about thinking, but when you can do it, put it into practice in a small way, and you see the success, that it's the biggest motivation that a person can get. And of course, when you're talking about various skill sets and knowledge sets, you have to get educated. It's all about learnability. It's one of the attitudes. How can I learn? How can I educate myself? So it's the environment that you create, you live with. It's the experiences that can translate your thinking and believing in yourself. And it's the education that brings that mindset in terms of thinking about entrepreneurial mindset. As Drishti spoke about, I would like to just talk about these 5 elements of motivation. First, you look at what is the purpose for me to start. So purpose, why? Preferably aligning to your passion. It could be generally a passion that drives you. I just want to start a business. So the key element here is how well do you know yourself? Understand your strengths, your weaknesses. So your strengths can definitely help you to move a lot, but then there are certain weakness elements. So how can I collaborate with people where my weaknesses are their strengths? So how do I bring it all together? So those are things. It's all about knowing yourself. The better you know self, are you a team player? Are you an individual player? All these elements, what is your emotional level? It's all about knowing yourself. And more than as much as if you can understand yourself, it's easier to understand others as well. And so knowing yourself and knowing others is a very important element, which is the starting point in which all this entrepreneurial mindset starts. Network, communication, collaboration, that's the second element. It's all about not just networking, it's all about, because when you're to communicate, we're talking about trust, relationship. Collaboration, networking is all about trust, relationship, and it comes through communication. If you'd ask me which is the one most important skill set that is required for any business, any career, I would say is communication. I might have a lot of thoughts, but how I communicate it, how do I persuade, how do I persuade people, how do I make them believe in my thought process? It's all about communication. And the key element about communication is about listening and questioning. And all this gets together in your thinking mindset, which is all about your attitude. Okay. So with these words, I would like to hand it back to Vasavi.
Very well explained, Mr. Ben. I think you covered almost all the points, here. And coming to, whatever you have said, the critical thinking, flexibility, collaboration, communication, network, the SWOT, the strengths and weaknesses, opportunities, and all of this, when we, put together, that is how a student can be motivated to develop entrepreneurial thinking. But we do not have entrepreneurial education in the school, in the classrooms. So my question to Dr. Sriparna is, do you think entrepreneurial education should be a part of the student's curriculum? So if so, why? And what are the different ways in which you think entrepreneurship can be taught in the classroom and beyond? And we would be glad to hear some examples from your side. I mean, how to go about it. So over to you.
Surely. Do we think, do we actually need entrepreneurship in curriculum? A lot of entrepreneurship as a paper is already there at different levels, right? At the, I think CBSE 11, 12, then at the university level. So they have started introducing entrepreneurship as a paper, but there are dangers in just introducing the paper, it as a paper, because if I talk about my own personal experience, there are universities which have started and they had asked me to teach entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is not something which you take up as a paper, you write down answers as to who is an entrepreneur, what are the qualities. If you're doing that, it's really dangerous. So it's important that how we introduce the subject, that becomes more important than the fact that you introduce, right? So that is firstly, that is it. But before that, I would just like to all of us to reflect as to who is an entrepreneur. Okay, the definition, there are a number of definitions on who an entrepreneur is. But if you look at one definition which makes a lot of sense and from which we can drive the fact that why we need entrepreneurship in the curriculum, it talks about entrepreneur as a person who mobilizes resources, who innovates, who takes a risk, and in the process, the person, he or she gains and the society also gains. Okay, from this particular definition, in no way talks about business. It has no, I mean, although we associate an entrepreneur with a person who does business, this definition per se, it's a universally accepted definition. In no way says that it has to do with starting a business. Basically, from that perspective, you can say anyone and everyone, whichever field he or she is in, if he or she has that entrepreneurial orientation, he works like an entrepreneur, he or she excels in life. So let me give you an example. A teacher. Can a teacher be an entrepreneurial teacher? Definitely yes, because what you do is within different ways in which teachers teach. There are some teachers who are definitely very creative, they innovate, they mobilize whatever resources are there. And then, the impact that the teacher is creating is much more than, any other normal process in which is taught. So, an entrepreneurial teacher, you can have an entrepreneurial doctor, a lawyer, you can have an entrepreneurial artist. So anyone who actually excels in life unknowingly has that entrepreneurial orientation, thinks or works like an entrepreneur. From that perspective, when we're looking at building future generation, we need to create enterprising students, irrespective of whichever field that student would like to go. So definitely, yes, entrepreneurship needs to be a part of the curriculum. So having said that, how do you introduce in the curriculum is more important than anything else. As I started with my initial comments, how do you introduce in the curriculum? Entrepreneurship is more about the mindset. It's more about attitude creation. And as we all know, attitude is something it's difficult to change the attitude as you are when you already are an adult. So in subtle ways, if we can start inculcating some of these qualities amongst the students, right from the school stage, then you unknowingly start acquiring some of these qualities. So that way, entrepreneurship, and then orienting them to some commercial aspects alongside that. That can be a way in which you can look at introducing in the curriculum, not as how many marks you're getting, but it could be grade, it could be some, you can look at ways in which there have been various experiments already being done. I'll touch upon that. And then, also looking at the fact that any person who has to excel in life, 3 capitals are required, right? The intellectual capital, the social capital, and the emotional capital. But now, if you look at emotional capital, again, we're talking about the same thing, the mindset, being an enterprising person, etc. So that's also another, and then I think we all know, and particularly VASSU, you would be knowing, Ben would be knowing more because you're from your background, etc. It's always the person with more emotional quotient which excels rather than the person who actually achieves, marks, grades that, and we've seen a person who can take, absorbs stress is a person who ultimately survives and excels in life. And today corporates are also looking at people with entrepreneurial mindsets. So they're not saying that we need managers, we need more of entrepreneurs. So all these again boils down to the fact that we need, definitely it needs to be a part of the curriculum. And then the other perspective is that why we need entrepreneurship in the curriculum is that we look at the average size of population in India. We talk about the demographic dividend. And 64% of the population is the average age is 29 years. So which such a large population in the age bracket of 29 years, and it's 10 million people who enter the workforce every year. And it's only 3.5 to 4 million jobs which are created every year. So look at the gap. So for that also we require, because when you have an entrepreneurial mindset, you will start taking a risk. You're also bringing in the, the commercial aspects. You start looking from a young age that this could be also one of the career options. So unknowingly, it's, you are imbibing, or you are trying to see that this can also be a entrepreneur, career, another career option. And in whatever pedagogy that we adopt, the need is to motivate people to look at entrepreneurship as a career option. I mean, starting business as a career option. There also, how we bring that into the minds of the children is important, because most of the time when we say, why do I want to become an entrepreneur? Trishti will be, could be adding to whatever I'm saying. Why do I want to become an entrepreneur? Common answers are what? I want to be my own boss. I need lots of money. I want to do things my way. Both Drishti and VASSU would, add on to whatever I'm saying. But are there more meaningful reasons why I become an entrepreneur? Because being an entrepreneur, you get a freedom. Then there is a scope for continuous learning. Because in no other profession is there continuous learning happen, because continuous learning can happen because all the time you're learning, and because to cope, to stay afloat, you have to keep on reinventing yourself. And then being an entrepreneur, it gives you a scope to create something permanent. When you're working, as long as today my tag is there as Indian Institute of Entrepreneurship. Tomorrow I retire, then I have nothing to say that this is something I created. But as an entrepreneur, you have the thing that you have, that this is something I created. So these are things which, if unknowingly, I mean, in a subtle way, you introduce in the curriculum, it's important that these aspects are covered when one is looking at teaching entrepreneurship. So definitely as a part, how do you teach entrepreneurship? Definitely not as a, credit course paper. Consciously bringing in certain subjects like, which bring in that entrepreneurial orientation. And even while you're teaching subjects like history, geography, history, economics, literature, whatever you're teaching, the teacher can always look at some stories from history, which depicts people who have that entrepreneurial orientation. So certainly, there'll be many, in history, we have so many stories about heroes who have that entrepreneur. So basically highlighting that. Same thing we can do in literature. Economics definitely as a subject. So entrepreneurship as a subject draws in from many other subjects. So you could, look at, if you're economics, teaching economics, there could be research on something as to what are the commercial aspects, or how do you do it, what are the scope, etc. When you're teaching science, there could be something on how do you, because normally what happens, research is purely academic. It has no, connect, mostly it doesn't have a connect to commercial aspects. So this blending of two can be the way you can teach entrepreneurship. Then maybe as kids, exposing them to things like shows like Shark Tanks, etc., giving them assignments, having, now we have the concept of Atal Tinkering Lab already coming into various schools. So there also automatically this is happening. you have idea competitions. So these are some of the ways in which entrepreneurship as a part of, and I think new education policy has immense scope for this. I mean, it's actually looking at ways in which you start introducing these aspects in a more, planned and, focused way. So that's how you could look at it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sriparna. This is beautifully explained. And I think, yes, it's not a curriculum that we have to look into. We have to look into more experiential ways of teaching. We have to look at joining the dots while we are talking with the children. I think the teacher need to have an entrepreneurial mindset in order to inculcate an entrepreneurial mindset in the student she's talking with. And yes, when you talk about the emotional capital, it just occurred to me the stress management, because entrepreneurs have a lot of stress. And I would say so because when we launch a new venture, there are a lot of chances that it might not click. There might be a lot of, other problems that we might be facing. So I think an entrepreneur really need to be resilient, need to manage stress, need to be able to, kind of meet up with the challenges that approach them. So let us hear firsthand from an entrepreneur. She's a young entrepreneur, and I would, Drishti, want to know from you what exactly motivated you to become an entrepreneur. And when we say that, entrepreneurs' brains are differently wired, it's generally said that. So do you agree to that? Number one. Number two, you are an engineer, you were an engineering student, and you did not opt for a job, but you opted to start something on your own. So what actually motivated you to do that? And what were the challenges that you faced? And now you feel that you have evolved stronger out of those and probably feel more happy. So can you share some of those with us? Over to you, Drishti.
Sure. So I'll start with the first question about, are entrepreneurs' brains wired differently? Or to make it even sound more simpler, are entrepreneurs born or made? So there is even a rumored entrepreneur's gene that some say predisposes us for, success in our chosen endeavors. So there was an article in the Forbes magazine in 20 where David K. Williams actually discusses the Founders Institute aptitude and personality test, which relates to the revenue growth and the market success of several ventures. And in that report, three things were highlighted. First is having high fluid intelligence. Second is high openness. And third is moderate agreeableness. So it's not always necessary that entrepreneurs are born with certain personality traits, but it definitely helps. So I think it's a mixture of both. And I believe it goes beyond just a certain person being born with entrepreneurial characteristic versus how do they have the ability to apply the certain entrepreneurial traits the very right way in their lives if they want to venture out in their respective journey. And second, I also strongly believe in the fact that we can all be made into something if as long as we apply ourselves unconditionally, and we can be influenced the way we think, we react, the way we are nurtured. So one of the popular business shows that Sriparna ma'am had just mentioned about Shark Tank, I have been following that show since a very long time, since I was in class 9, I believe. That was one of my favorite shows growing up. There is one particular shark called Robert Herjavec, who's one of the sharks in Shark Tank. And he had shared once that one of his very early mentors, his name is Roars Marsden, and he had shared that he quotes, he took me to the window in our office and asked me to look at the hot dog vendors selling at the edge of our parking lot. He told me that he was acting like the vendor, pushing product and doing all the work to make a living. Now, Robert says that he followed the statement with, you need to be the guy supplying the vendor, the dogs to, you need to be the guy supplying the dogs to this particular vendors if you ever want to scale. So it all comes to a little bit of nurture involved with entrepreneurial success, because an entrepreneur can evolve with time. One does not, is not born with 100% characteristics of any entrepreneur that has made them successful. They can be molded, they can be nurtured, they can be mentored into thinking a certain way, which depends on how much success you can have during your entrepreneurial journey. So I think it's a bit of both. They're born and they can be nurtured during their journey. Coming to your second question about why did I choose to become an entrepreneur? I think this answer is very much related to the fact that I had just shared, that entrepreneurs can be nurtured as well. So when I joined engineering, to pursue engineering, I never had the idea that I would start something by the time I graduate college. I was very much into the whole rat race, first of all, which is obviously changing right now. Initially I already had the idea that by the end of my fourth year, I'll probably either pursue master's in engineering or I would go for a job. But like I said, because entrepreneurs can be nurtured, I think a major part of my engineering journey is attributed to the people in the startup ecosystem from Assam. And that includes Sriparna ma'am as well. Ma'am had been invited as a guest to our college several times. And especially during my early years of college, especially in my first and second year, ma'am was one of those person via whom I got influence and I got the idea of what is the potential of actually starting up in a place like Assam. Because I'm pretty sure you are already aware that the Assam startup policy had been laid out in the year 2017. And, especially when you have those policies in place, the ease of doing business is much more easier. Having the infrastructural support is sort of makes it effective for you as an entrepreneur to accelerate more in your journey. So that sort of acts as a catalyst. So definitely having the right connect in the ecosystem. And also I was very much active in my so every college has those entrepreneurship cell where students are introduced to what startups are, the nitty-gritties involved to how to build your startup and all those things related to that. So that actually gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of people from the startup region. Are there any potential of growth? If I go further in the journey, whether or not I'll be also nurtured to the path of entrepreneurship during my engineering days. And that is exactly why I chose to become an entrepreneur. Second, why I chose to become money. My first priority was always to try and understand how can I create meaningful and impactful thing that can directly affect either the immediate people or the kind of my domain of interest that directly benefits the people that I am very much concerned about. Or is it a community that I am trying to contribute to, or are there any other people that I want to directly impact, irrespective of the quantity? So that was one of my biggest drives to choose the entrepreneurial journey. And so yeah, that is how I eventually started out with the startup. So I hope this answers your question.
Yes, it does. And thank you so much for sharing your journey. And what were the basic challenges that you faced? Very quickly, if you can tell me three biggest challenges that you had, that you faced when you, had your startup launched.
I think the very basics, when you start up, right, you don't know how to work on a proper business plan. You don't know how to form a right team. You don't know how to do the market research, or what are the proper steps that you need to build the foundation of the company. And that was my initial challenge. Even though I did have very few mentors in my early days of starting up, but finding the right connect was a challenge, which however changed because the incubation center came up, which is Assam Startup, the Nest, which ultimately helped me get the right industry connect and the right mentors who had guided throughout the journey. Second was also, I think one of the prominent challenges when I faced initially is hiring the right talent. Like, I did not just had to look at the skills of the people who were working with us, but also whether or not those people were aligned with the vision of the company, or even the vision of the people who were part of the core team or the co-founders. So finding that right set of talent was definitely a challenge. And third would be people management was one of the skills that I think I am still learning over time. And that was one of the challenges that I faced initially, because when you are working with a diversified set of people, especially in the sector that I am involved in, when you are directly involved with the blue collared workforce, and then there are the teams who are directly working with you as well, there is a multitude of personalities that you're dealing with. How are they thinking? How are they reacting to the things that you are saying? And I think that is a skill that I have inculcated over time, and I still keep on learning more as I keep meeting more people and I keep working with different kind of people. So these were the top 3 challenges I had faced initially.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And I would say that entrepreneurs never fall short of challenges. It's on an everyday basis. I've been an entrepreneur since 2002, and still I face challenges which may be, varied, different. And when you're launching some other, brand or something, so there are a new set of challenges that come up. So it's always I think it's a learning that we always have, and we can never come up with something which is perfect. So because the dynamics keep changing and nothing is perfect. So we need to be very flexible. We need to keep changing. We need to, upscale. We need to look what is going around us, what's happening around us, what is basically, the demand, the market. So all the time we need to be alert. I think that would save me from dementia in my old age, because, because it keeps me alert all the time and thinking. Yeah, so I think we've come almost to the end of this very, very pertinent discussion, and lovely points given by our panelists today who took out the time from their busy schedule to be here. And I thank you all for joining us. And before I go, I've made a lot of notes. I think I'll keep these notes to myself. I'll also refer because I'm always a learner. So what Mr. Ben had said about, the qualities, the characteristics that we need to have, basically motivation, critical thinking, flexibility, collaboration, decision making, and a lot of things that always keeps us going, that will keep our brains working all the time, and our, keeping us, giving us that impetus to go on. Dr. Sriparna shared some very, very valuable insight into how an entrepreneurship curriculum can be framed, which cannot be a completely, a framework which is with this and that simple activities or some lectures, but a lot of experiential learning, a lot of thinking, a lot of decision making activities which would enable people to think out of the box, take up a situation and solve the problem, right? And from Drishti, we heard all her challenges, why she wanted to become an entrepreneur. And I must say, today's generation is much luckier, because 2002, way back, we had no one. We got a mentor. Probably, Mr. Ben was my mentor in 2017 or something. And before that, I never had a mentor, in fact. So I think, so now the stage has been set actually for entrepreneurship, for growth, for the growth mindset. And I think this is a time to grab, and this is a time to go ahead. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll come up with our next webinar on another important topic, which will be related to students, so that they can develop their skills and they can be more future ready. And with that, I sign off. Dr. Vasudevacharya signing off, and thank you so much. Have a great evening ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you.